A hurricane tore through our town, but my house stood unscathed. Not because of luck, but because I built it to survive. Now the HOA is suing me for $10 million, claiming I redirected the storm onto them. They tried to break me with lies. They forgot. I built for war. I've always believed in building things to last. Maybe that's the old Navy engineer in me talking, or maybe it's just the stubborn streak I inherited from my father. Either way, when I bought that stretch of land on the edge of Clearwater, Florida 10 years ago, I wasn't looking for HOA-approved pastels or identical mailboxes. I wanted space, peace, a bit of elevation, and the freedom to live without a damn committee voting on the color of my front door. The plot sat on a small bluff overlooking the coast, surrounded by palm scrub and open sky. Beautiful, windy, a little isolated, but that's how I like it. I designed the house myself, 3-bedroom concrete and steel frame, elevated foundations, a storm-resistant roof made with titanium alloy tiles, triple-sealed hurricane glass windows, solar grid backup with battery storage, and a reinforced shelter core in the basement that could double as a command post. Hell, I probably overdid it. But in Florida, you either prepare for the storm, or you become the headline. Funny thing is, it wasn't the weather that turned out to be the real threat. Back when I started construction, the lot sat just outside the limits of a development called Seaview Ridge. At the time, it was just a few rows of fancy homes with golf course lawns and driveways that all looked copied from a Stepford catalog. The residents all belonged to a homeowners association, Seaview HOA, known for being notoriously controlling. You couldn't hang a flag without a form in triplicate. I never signed a thing. My land wasn't included in their boundary, and the original deed from the county clearly confirmed it. I made sure of that before the first shovel hit the dirt. But 2 years after I finished building, the HOA president, her name was Karen Lawson, and yes, she lived up to it, came knocking. Not metaphorically. She literally parked her pristine white BMW at the base of my driveway and marched up like she was storming Normandy. I was out back reinforcing the patio posts and heard her calling out from the front. "Mr. Bryant, I'd like a word." She had one of those voices that made your teeth itch. When I opened the door, she was already holding a clipboard like it was a badge. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, perfect nails, and the posture of a woman who thought she ran the world. I knew the type. "Yes?" I asked, not offering to shake her hand. She launched into a spiel about aesthetic disruption and community cohesion, and how my metallic exterior cladding was reflecting sunlight into the living room windows of the Andersons on Lot 27. Then she hit me with it. The HOA had voted unanimously that my property must come into voluntary compliance with their architectural standards. I blinked. "You're aware this property isn't under your HOA, right?" She smiled like a wolf in a cashmere sweater. "Boundaries are dynamic, Mr. Bryant. Given your proximity and visual impact, we believe integration would be mutually beneficial." "Lady," I said, "the only thing dynamic around here is your imagination." She handed me a packet of printed bylaws, 87 pages thick, and told me I had 30 days to remove the unapproved materials from my roof and exterior. I laughed so hard I nearly gave myself a hernia. That was just the beginning. Over the next few months, I started getting letters, certified mail, notices claiming I was violating community uniformity, that my security lighting was excessive, that my solar panels were visually disruptive. I ignored them. I'd already run my build plans past the county zoning board years ago. Everything was up to code, better than code. I had stamped approvals, inspection reports, and one hell of a legal buffer. But Karen didn't like being ignored. She stepped it up. Soon I started seeing strange cars idling near my property line. men with clipboards taking photos from the shoulder. One day, I caught some poor bastard hiding in the brush with a telephoto lens. I walked out with a cold beer and offered him one. He left, fast. Then came the HOA Community Enhancement Directive, a fancy name for a ban on non-reflective safety installations. A direct swipe at my anti-storm panels. Even though it had zero authority over me, they sent me a copy, with a sticky note. Consider this a courtesy warning. That note went straight into the shredder. I had no plans to change a damn thing. My house was designed to survive Category 4 winds. Most of those Seaview Ridge homes, they couldn't handle a stiff sneeze. No offense to them, but I wasn't going to risk my safety for their beige-on-beige sensibilities. I kept a low profile after that, cut my grass, didn't wave to the HOA enforcers when they drove by. Just lived my life and ran simulations on the weather patterns every month, adjusting my home systems like any good prepper would. And then the summer everything changed came the warning. Hurricane Cassandra. A beast of a storm forming off the coast with an angry, wobbling track. The forecasts were getting grim. By the second week of August, every network was bracing for landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast. As I sealed up the last exterior shutter and triple-checked the generator system, I looked down from my deck and saw the Seaview Ridge folks scrambling, taping windows, filling sandbags, yelling into phones. A few even glanced up at my fortress on the hill like maybe I knew something they didn't. And then the wind started howling. I hunkered down, all systems held. Inside the storm shelter, I watched Cassandra rip across the landscape like a fury from hell. I monitored external cameras, watched rooftops fly, trees snap, debris swirl like blades in a blender. But not my house, not my systems. I heard the storm, I felt it, but I didn't flinch. When the wind died and the rain tapered off, I stepped outside. Seaview Ridge was flattened, roofs gone, flooded basements, power lines tangled like spaghetti. I could hear someone crying in the distance. Cars were upturned, trees through windows. My house? Not a scratch. And that's when the real storm began. The morning after Hurricane Cassandra, the sky looked like nothing bad had ever happened. Crisp blue, a gentle breeze, the smell of wet earth. The kind of morning that makes you forget nature just tried to murder you and everyone you know. I stood on my deck with a mug of coffee, staring out at the wreckage below. My house hadn't just survived. It looked like it had casually shrugged through a mild rain shower. Down in Seaview Ridge, it was another story. Shingles lay scattered like confetti from a tornado-themed parade. Broken windows, fences twisted into modern art, palm trees snapped clean in half. The road was littered with debris and flooded in places. Folks wandered around stunned, clutching phones with dead batteries, speaking in that dazed post-disaster whisper. I'd barely taken 2 sips when I spotted her. Karen Lawson herself marching up the hill with the full intensity of someone who believes she can sue the weather. Her perfectly coiffed bob was gone, replaced by a frizzy helmet of humidity hatred, and her designer blouse was splattered with mud. She looked like Cassandra had taken her personally. "Mr. Bryant," she yelled before she even reached the fence line. I set my coffee down. "Good morning, Karen. Quite a storm." She jabbed a trembling finger toward my house. You did this!" I blinked. "I'm pretty sure the hurricane did this." She shook her head violently. No, your house, your bunker, clearly affected the airflow. The storm hit us harder because of you." I stared at her, waiting for a punchline. Nothing. She was dead serious. "Karen, you can't seriously... You violated community standards with your reflective panels," she cut in. "They diverted the wind. They weaponized the storm." That was a new one. I'd been accused of visual disruption, architectural bullying, and lowering neighbor morale, But meteorological sabotage was a fresh charge. Before I could respond, she launched into a speech like she was on a courtroom drama show. Our homes were damaged because your unregulated fortress disrupted natural wind patterns. You turned nature against us. Your negligence caused millions in losses. Right then, a neighbor, Mr. Hendricks, whose gazebo was now wrapped around a street lamp, joined the growing crowd behind her. He looked furious. "I saw your roof," he shouted. "My insurance adjuster said the wind had to go somewhere after deflecting off that thing." Another woman chimed in. "My SUV flipped over. You owe us." They were serious, they were angry, and they wanted a villain. Unfortunately, I was standing upright and dry, making me the obvious choice. Karen crossed her arms triumphantly. "You will be hearing from the HOA's legal counsel. We will seek full compensation, $10 million. My jaw dropped. "You're suing me? Because my house didn't fall apart? You manipulated weather patterns," she hissed. "Do not pretend you didn't design this monstrosity for some tactical purpose." I rubbed my temples. "Karen, it's a hurricane-resistant home. I wasn't trying to redirect the damn jet stream." She leaned in close, eyes narrowed with righteous fury. "A good neighbor suffers with everyone else. You made sure only you would be safe. That is not how community works." I actually snorted. "Oh, absolutely. Next time I'll leave a few weak points so we can all bond while roofing together." Her nose wrinkled like I'd insulted her soul. She turned sharply, rallying the crowd like a general retreating with a promise of revenge. "This is far from over. We will hold you accountable." They stormed off, limping through the mud and rubble, because apparently their legs were as unreinforced as their roofs. I picked my coffee back up. It was still warm. I took another slow sip. "Well," I muttered to myself, "guess the storm hasn't left yet." Inside, I checked my voicemail. 3 new messages, all HOA threats. One neighbor demanding I pay their deductible. A news reporter wanting a statement on the conspiracy theory circulating online. Great. The internet had already decided I caused the hurricane like some suburban supervillain. I glanced out the window at the ruined neighborhood below. I wasn't heartless. I planned to help. I had supplies, tools, generators. Basic human decency. But something told me that goodwill wasn't going to be accepted without paperwork, regulations, and probably a meeting. The kind where Karen would bring cookies that tasted like oppression. I sighed, tightened my tool belt, and stepped outside. If they were going to accuse me anyway, I might as well go down a helpful man. Even if I had apparently just survived a hurricane by committing meteorological war crimes. By the time the official notice from the HOA arrived, hand-delivered because Karen believed in ceremony, I was already knee-deep in helping clean up half their damn neighborhood. It was printed on thick, watermarked paper, which was ironic considering most of the residents didn't have running water at the time. Notice of community damages caused by structural interference. Demand for compensation, $10 million. I laughed when I read it. Laughed so hard I dropped a roofing nail on my foot. The only reason I didn't march straight down to Karen's disaster of a lawn and hand her a flaming rebuttal was because I'd already made a smarter move. I called my lawyer. Susan Chang had been my legal bulldog since the day I bought this property. Ex-military jag, Harvard Law, and just pissed off enough to enjoy a fight. When I forwarded her the demand letter, she called me 20 minutes later. "I read the whole thing," she said. "It's not a lawsuit, it's a tantrum in legal format." "Good," I said. "Because if they think I've got 10 million lying around, they must have sniffed a few too many roofing adhesives." Susan sighed. "They're not trying to win in court, Tom. They're trying to win in public. It's about narrative. Your house stood, theirs didn't. They're scared and they're angry. People lash out when they don't understand why something works. Well, I offered to help them upgrade 3 years ago. You remember how that went? Yes, she said dryly. They called you a doomsday prepper and refused to sign the storm readiness petition you circulated. Right. That had been a fun neighborhood meeting. I was the crazy guy with titanium shingles. Until now. Susan got to work immediately. She filed a counter notice, informed the HOA that I had no legal obligation to them, and sent a request to cease all direct communication. That alone was worth the billable hour. But Karen didn't like walls she couldn't scale. That same week, she and her inner circle of clipboard commandos launched a media blitz. I started getting calls from news stations, bloggers, even a conspiracy podcast wanting to know if I intentionally engineered the storm path using reflective sonic tech. Reflective sonic tech. I was still laughing about that when I got the first knock at my door from an independent science expert the HOA had hired. He was wearing khakis, boat shoes, and a polo shirt that had never seen a drop of sweat. He introduced himself as Dr. Rick, no last name, no credentials shown. I'd like to conduct a wind recreation analysis, he said, waving what looked like a leaf blower attached to a GoPro. I shut the door in his face. Next came the pamphlets. HOA members started putting out flyers. Protect your community. Demand safe architecture. Featuring a photo of my home photoshopped to look like a Bond villain's lair. I'll admit, they made it look pretty badass. Someone even added lightning bolts behind it, 5 out of 5 stars for effort. But the more absurd they got, the more attention they attracted. Suddenly, my inbox was flooded, not with threats, but with support. Engineers, architects, hurricane researchers, real experts, people who understood what I'd built and wanted to help set the record straight. One of them was Dr. Lisa Moreau, a hurricane behavior specialist from MIT who'd seen the flyers on Twitter. She emailed me directly. I've reviewed the footage of your home and its structural design. What they're claiming is not just false, it's physically impossible. Would you allow me to publish a formal rebuttal? Would I? I invited her over the next day. Lisa showed up with charts, wind modeling software, a tablet full of simulations, and the kind of confidence you only get when you've humiliated climate deniers for sport. She walked around my house, took measurements, ran models, and confirmed what I already knew. The idea that my panels redirected wind into the neighborhood below was like saying an umbrella caused a flood. She even ran a live-streamed simulation with overlays and commentary. See this? She said, pointing to a swirling mass of digital wind. Even with total reflection, which isn't how physics works, by the way, the impact zone would be unchanged. Your house didn't cause damage, your house just didn't die. Her video went viral in under 8 hours. That night I launched my own channel, Stormproof Reality, and uploaded a detailed walkthrough of my home. Blueprints, materials, building costs, timestamps from construction. I included footage of the HOA meetings from 3 years ago where they'd mocked my suggestions for storm prep. I ended the video with one line. They called me paranoid. Now they want $10 million. Maybe it's time we all started preparing smarter. It exploded. 2 million views by morning. Hashtags. Think pieces. A late-night host called me Florida's Iron Man. I didn't know whether to feel flattered or worried. Karen, of course, hated all of it. She called a press conference in front of the collapsed HOA clubhouse, which had been reduced to rubble and a folding table. With shaky hands and a poorly disguised neck brace, she accused me of manipulating public opinion and weaponizing science. Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa was invited to CNN to explain how hurricanes work to a national audience. And the HOA, they filed a second demand. This one for emotional distress. I forwarded it to Susan without even opening the PDF. Let them rage. I had facts. I had receipts, and for once I had the internet on my side. But deep down, I knew something Karen didn't. She was about to step on the wrong legal landmine. And I had the map. I've never been a fan of courtrooms. Too much bad lighting and too many smug people in cheap suits pretending to be clever. But on the morning of the preliminary hearing, I put on my best gray jacket, cleaned my boots, and stood in front of the mirror thinking, "You're not the defendant. You're the guy with the house still standing." Susan met me at the courthouse steps. She wore black like a war widow and carried a thick binder labeled Operation Karen. I asked her if that was really necessary. "It's for morale," she said, not smiling. The HOA had filed an official civil complaint now, not just a demand letter. $10 million in damages for reckless endangerment of community welfare, architectural assault, and wind interference. I still couldn't read that without snorting. I half expected the court to laugh it out of the building. But then the judge walked in, middle-aged, tired eyes, the kind of man who looked like he'd rather be mowing his lawn. The HOA's lawyer, a slick little toad named Bryce Witherspoon, stood up and made his opening statement like he was auditioning for a Netflix courtroom drama. He painted me as a rogue homeowner, flaunting unregulated technology, arrogantly modifying my property with unknown materials, and ignoring community wisdom that could have prevented tragedy. He even described my roof as militarized. Susan leaned over and whispered, "Is that even a word?" I whispered back, "Not outside of Call of Duty." Then came their star evidence, a glossy printed report from an aerodynamic consultant claiming that my storm panels created high-pressure deflection zones. Sounded fancy, but when Susan asked to see the expert's credentials, the report had no signature, no author. Just a logo for something called Atlantic Resilience Group, which, when Susan Googled it in real time, turned out to be a defunct Shell LLC created 6 weeks prior. "Your Honor," Susan said, "this isn't an expert report, it's a PowerPoint printed on resume paper." The judge raised an eyebrow. Bryce Witherspoon looked uncomfortable. Then Susan dropped the first bombshell. "We have documentation showing that this group was registered by Karen Lawson's cousin, who works as a DJ in Tampa and has zero engineering background." The courtroom fell silent. I could see Karen sitting behind her lawyer, lips twitching, face the color of spoiled yogurt. Then it got worse, for them. Susan submitted video evidence, footage from a security camera outside my garage showing HOA representatives trespassing on my property the week after the storm. They were taking measurements with tape, photographing my wiring and whispering like they were robbing a bank. The best part? They accidentally tripped my motion sensor floodlights, screamed and ran like raccoons. I'd edited it into slow motion with the Benny Hill theme in the background for my YouTube. But Susan presented the raw version. The judge reviewed the footage with the kind of expression usually reserved for car crashes and reality TV. Karen's lawyer tried to object. He claimed I had no sign warning about surveillance. "I have 12 signs," I said. "They're printed in bold red letters with a cartoon of a camera yelling, 'Smile, trespasser.'" Then came the climax. Susan pulled out a printed email thread, leaked by a former HOA secretary who'd resigned right after the hurricane. In the emails, Karen instructs the board to fabricate something technical-looking and to go hard on the whole weaponized architecture angle. In another message, she writes, "If we frame this right, we can bankrupt him, maybe even get his property annexed." The judge froze mid-note. "Ms. Lawson," he said slowly, "were you or were you not aware that your association was encouraging the creation of false reports to justify this lawsuit?" Karen stood up, all pearls and panic. "That's taken out of context. We were just brainstorming." "Sit down," her lawyer whispered. Susan stood again, cool and calm. "Your Honor, We now file a motion for dismissal of all charges plus intent to pursue counter-litigation for defamation, harassment, property trespass, and abuse of process. The judge nodded, face like stone. Motion under review. And I'm referring this to the district attorney's office for criminal review regarding potential forgery and civil conspiracy. Karen's face cracked. Not metaphorically. She looked like someone had just slapped her with a wet tax audit. We walked out of the courthouse to a wall of reporters. Microphones shoved toward my mouth, cameras clicking. Someone shouted, "Do you have anything to say to the HOA?" I paused, adjusted my collar, and looked right into the lens. Build better. Lie less. Susan looked at me sideways. That was actually kind of catchy. I smiled. Put it on a mug. That night, news stations ran the clip nonstop. Florida man accused of weaponizing his roof cleared of all charges. The memes were relentless. One had my face over Iron Man's body with the caption, "He didn't cause the storm. He became the storm." And Karen, she didn't go quietly. The next morning, she filed a counterclaim for emotional distress, said she couldn't sleep because of the public backlash and needed financial compensation for narrative trauma. Susan called me, giggling. Narrative trauma? Apparently your logic hurt her feelings. I cracked open a beer and stared out at the clean lines of my still-standing home. They'd tried to drag me down with nonsense. Now the nonsense had teeth marks. And the system? For once, it was listening. Karen Lawson was gone, just like that. The day after the judge referred her for criminal review, she disappeared from Seaview Ridge. Her white BMW was missing from the driveway, her blinds were drawn, and her mail was left piling up like the last sad remnants of a dictatorship toppled overnight. Rumors flew. One said she was in a wellness retreat in Colorado. Another claimed she was hiding at her sister's place in Tallahassee. A third said she was on the run, living in a van off the grid, wearing a fake mustache. Honestly, I didn't care. The moment the criminal side kicked in, it stopped being my problem. I had Susan handling the counter lawsuit, and I had a roof to repair after all the media drones started hovering too close for comfort. Fame has its price, usually in battery-operated quadcopters. But even with Karen gone, the HOA wasn't done playing dirty. At first, they acted like none of it had ever happened. They scrubbed their website of all references to the case, deleted social media posts. But they couldn't scrub internal emails, and Susan had a copy of everything. A week later, 2 HOA board members contacted us anonymously. Both of them, let's call them Dave and Shelley, wanted out. Guilt had finally gotten the better of them. Shelley met Susan in a cafe 2 towns over. She brought her HOA laptop, printed memos, and a thumb drive that could have melted steel beams with what it contained. Turns out Karen had been using HOA funds, over $60,000 of them, to pay her private attorney fees, fund her consultants, and reimburse herself for administrative trauma support. She'd also authorized a line item labeled Reputation Management, Shadow Accounts. Susan nearly spit her coffee. She was using HOA dues to run fake Reddit accounts? Shelley just nodded. And Facebook, too. She had one that pretended to be a storm victim who blamed the titanium bunker on the hill for everything. God help me, I almost missed her theatrical flair. We brought it all to the prosecutor. 2 days later, the district attorney's office unsealed an investigation and issued an official subpoena for HOA financial records. It was no longer just a civil spat. This was now criminal territory, misuse of organizational funds, fraud, possible conspiracy. The media went feral. CNN ran a headline. Florida HOA implodes amid storm hoax and embezzlement scandal. MSNBC called it the suburban scandal of the decade. Fox News ran with titanium-roofed Patriot fights back. My YouTube inbox overflowed with speaking invites, interviews, and one podcast offer to guest host an episode on neighborhood tyranny. I declined that one. Even I have limits. Karen's inner circle cracked. The HOA vice president resigned publicly, citing deep ethical concerns and apologizing for allowing myself to be manipulated by a narrative of fear. She gave a tearful statement in front of what was left of the community clubhouse, which by now looked like a post-apocalyptic lemonade stand. Meanwhile, HOA meetings turned chaotic. At one of them, and yes, I got the footage, a group of residents showed up with printed binders of Karen's misdeeds, demanding a full audit, leadership overhaul, and a total reworking of the HOA bylaws. One man brought a whiteboard labeled "How Not to Ruin a Neighborhood," complete with bullet points like, "Don't fake hurricanes," "Don't sue wind," "Don't impersonate engineers' poetry, really." But the cherry on top came one Sunday morning. I was repairing a fence panel along the back of my property when I noticed a small moving truck idling near Karen's house. A woman in an oversized sun hat stepped out, holding a large tote bag and trying to stay hidden behind a pair of sunglasses the size of dinner plates. It was her. She was back, but not for long. Within minutes, 2 county sheriffs pulled into the cul-de-sac. The timing was so perfect it felt like a sting operation. Karen didn't run. She froze like a cat that had just remembered it was a house pet and not a jungle predator. The officers approached calmly. One of them had a folder in hand. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could read her body language like a novel. There was a lot of finger-pointing, lip-quivering, and one dramatic hand-to-heart gesture that I assume meant, "You can't do this to me. I'm the victim here." They didn't buy it. Karen was taken into custody, not in handcuffs, but with that unmistakable walk of someone realizing the rules finally apply to them. As she was helped into the cruiser, a few neighbors peeked out from behind their blinds. One waved. That night, Susan popped champagne. I'm not kidding. She brought over a bottle and toasted on my deck while we watched the news play the footage of Karen's arrest. Fraud, trespassing, abuse of office, attempted defamation, she said, listing the charges like ingredients in a recipe for karma. And this is just the beginning. I raised my glass. 2 titanium roofs. But we weren't done. Not yet. Susan was already drafting a lawsuit for personal damages. My reputation, the trespassing, the surveillance, the mental strain. But that wasn't all. We were also going after the HOA as an institution. Karen didn't act alone, Susan said. At best, they let her run wild. At worst, they helped. She wasn't wrong. The HOA had been silent when Karen weaponized their rules. Silent when she forged reports. Silent when she harassed me. Now they'd get their turn under the microscope. And me? I was just getting started. The courtroom was packed. Not like last time. This time there were folding chairs added along the back wall, 2 local news crews stationed outside, and a guy with a boom mic who kept tripping over people's feet. The air buzzed with anticipation, like everyone was waiting for a public execution but weren't sure if popcorn was allowed. Karen sat at the defense table, flanked by a new lawyer, a quieter one with a cheap briefcase and a face that looked like he'd aged 5 years in the last week. She wasn't wearing pearls this time, just a plain navy blouse, no makeup, and a stare that alternated between blank and bitter. The prosecutor opened with a simple line. This is not a case about property. It's a case about power, abused, distorted, and disguised as community concern. I liked this guy immediately. Over the next 2 days, the court reviewed everything. The fraudulent wind report, the fake engineering firm, the misused HOA funds, the emails encouraging board members to fabricate urgency and crush non-compliant owners. Susan presented the financial audit with a precision that would have made a forensic accountant weep. $68,000 misappropriated. Unauthorized wire transfers. HOA funds routed into what Karen described as discretionary executive accounts. The prosecution showed a receipt where she bought a damn massage chair with HOA money. Karen's defense tried to play the mental health card, said she was under extreme stress, that her actions were misguided but not malicious. Then they wheeled out a psychiatrist who claimed Karen exhibited community martyrdom syndrome. I nearly laughed out loud. Susan leaned over and whispered, "She paid someone to say she's too helpful." "I swear I'm living in a deleted episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm," I muttered back. But no amount of sob stories could erase what was on record. The judge delivered the verdict in a tone that suggested he'd rather be home trimming his hedges. This court finds Karen Lawson guilty of fraudulent misuse of HOA funds, filing false claims, and attempted civil conspiracy to commit defamation. She got 3 years probation, 6 months of house arrest, mandatory community service, and a court-ordered personal apology letter to every resident whose dues were misused, including me. The best part? The court ruled that she must personally repay $300,000 in punitive damages. Not from HOA money, not from some legal loophole, from her to Nuck. And I wasn't done. Susan stood and delivered our civil damages claim. Methodically, clearly, no drama, just hard numbers. The cost of legal defense, the impact on my reputation, the harassment, the property trespass, the mental toll. Even the ridiculous internet conspiracy theories that made me a meme for weeks. We asked for $2 million. The jury came back with 2.3, not a cent less. The HOA, now operating under temporary external oversight appointed by the court, was also fined for negligent governance. Their accounts frozen. A forensic audit ordered. The court assigned a mediator to help restructure or dissolve the entire organization within 90 days. You could feel the silence ripple through the courtroom. For once, nobody applauded. There was just a collective, stunned stillness, like a wall had finally cracked and people were still processing the sound of it falling. After the session, neighbors who once accused me of playing God with storm winds shook my hand outside. Some apologized, others just gave me that look, the one where a person realizes they were wrong and hopes you'll understand they're too proud to say it aloud. I nodded anyway. A few of them even helped load my truck later that week when I went to donate emergency supplies to other communities hit harder by Cassandra. People I didn't know started showing up to my live streams and thanking me for standing up against the HOA machine. Hell, someone mailed me a plaque, Honorary Defender of the Free Roof. It was tacky. I loved it. The community started changing. Without Karen's grip, the board opened a public forum. Real discussions, no threats, no form letters, just people trying to rebuild their homes and relationships. Even Shelley and Dave, the two whistleblowers, were nominated to help lead the new HOA review committee. And Karen? Well, she wasn't completely silent. From the solitude of her house arrest, she released a video statement. In it, she apologized, sort of. Claimed she was misguided, that she only wanted to protect the community, and that circumstances got out of hand. The comments were disabled, probably for her own safety. But to her credit, she wrote that letter. "Dear Mr. Bryant, I regret the actions I took and the harm they caused." I didn't read past the third sentence. I framed it and hung it in the guest bathroom, right above the extra rolls of toilet paper. As for the money, I didn't spend it all. I paid Susan, obviously, sent some to storm relief charities, rebuilt the tool shed. And the rest, let's just say, I had a surprise planned, one that would outlive the storm. 1 year later, the old HOA office was gone, literally, bulldozed. In its place stood a modest but well-built structure with solar panels on the roof, a covered veranda, and an open design that invited light instead of trapping it behind shuttered windows and bureaucracy. The sign out front read, Community Resilience Center, in honor of Thomas Bryant. Yeah, my name, on a building. Never thought I'd see the day. I didn't ask for it. In fact, I tried to decline when they proposed it at the newly formed neighborhood assembly. But they insisted, said it wasn't about ego, said it was about memory. So I let them. Inside, the place served as an open shelter, training center, and storm prep hub. People came to take first aid courses, learn basic home reinforcement techniques, and yes, some even asked me to teach workshops. How to build a house like it's going to war. I said I'd consider it. Maybe. The neighborhood had changed. Not overnight, but over months. The new board was transparent. They held open Q&As. No fines, no aggressive letters, just real conversations. A few residents still grumbled that the good old days of uniformity were gone, but they were mostly quiet now. You'd be amazed how humility blooms when someone watches a judge hand down real accountability. Shelley stopped by once a week, usually with banana bread and HOA gossip I didn't ask for but somehow always enjoyed. Dave started a neighborhood watch, though mostly it involved walking around with his golden retriever and waving at squirrels. And me? I still lived on my hill. Same house, same titanium roof, same storm shutters that pissed Karen off so much back when she still thought fear was a leadership strategy. I spent most days in the garage workshop tweaking things, building a new wind turbine prototype, and occasionally yelling at YouTube commenters who thought hurricanes were a government weapon. Some conspiracy theories never die. They just migrate to different platforms. The compensation money was mostly gone now, in the best way possible. After the lawsuits, I'd put $200,000 into a community fund to help rebuild the most damaged homes. We used it to reinforce structures, replace roofs, and in one case, rehome a single mother and her 2 kids who had lost everything. I didn't make speeches about it. I just signed the checks and went home. But the best moment, the moment where I knew everything had really turned a corner, came on a Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on the deck, grilling ribs and watching the horizon when a voice called out from below. "Hey, Tom." It was Danny, a teenager from down the road who used to ride his dirt bike past my house like he was being chased by the devil. Now he worked part-time at the Resilience Center, helping organize tool drives and safety seminars. He'd cleaned up, found focus. Still couldn't grill worth a damn, but we all have our weaknesses. He waved up at me, grinning. "Storm season's starting. You think we'll get another Cassandra?" I smirked. "I don't predict storms. I just build for them." He nodded solemnly, then added, "Just don't redirect any more wind, all right?" I burst out laughing. "No promises, kid, but if it happens, I'll aim for someone with a worse garden." He gave me a thumbs up and took off. Later that night, a group of neighbors stopped by for an impromptu barbecue. Someone brought cornbread. Someone else brought beer. Nobody talked about lawsuits. Nobody mentioned the HOA. We talked about weather and fences and life. One guy made fun of my hurricane bunker again, and this time I laughed with him. It felt normal. Not perfect. Not utopia. But real. The kind of real that comes from facing a storm and surviving. Together. Just before midnight, I walked out to the edge of my property and looked down over the lights of the neighborhood. Some flickered. Some glowed steady. All of them meant something. I breathed deep. Then a breeze picked up, soft but steady, rustling the palms and cooling the air. I smiled. "Let's see what you've got," I whispered to the wind, and this time I wasn't alone.